Hi, morning everyone. Welcome to episode 60 of the Knitting Expat Podcast. I have a little Derek with me here today. Today's date is May the 4th, so may the 4th be with you, Star Wars Day. And yeah, my name is Mina. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram and the podcast group and everything on Ravelry. I'll be having little thingies coming up at the bottom here to tell you all of that, and everything is linked below in the video on YouTube. And rather rare for Derek to be on the podcast because he's usually sleeping at this time, but due to some circumstances he's here, and I'm taking the opportunity to snag him and snuggle him on the podcast for you guys. Yes, I love that face. That snaggletooth just kills me every time. I received a package this week that has some cat treats, cat toys in it, and I think one of them has catnip, and he's going absolutely bonkers trying to get into that box. So that's what's been keeping him around this morning, I think. Right, I wanted to also say hello to new and returning viewers. Thank you so much for checking me out today if it's your first time, and thank you for coming back if this isn't your first time. And now he wants to play with these. Hey, you want to play with my needles? Hey? No, not for eating. He's not usually the most entertaining cat on the podcast, but today he seems to be full of energy, so we all go with it. And Hugo's around my feet somewhere, so hopefully he'll make an appearance soon. So yes, like I was saying, thank you to all new and returning viewers. I really appreciate you guys coming to check me out. And yeah, show notes are on the blog, which is knittingexpat.wordpress.com, and that's also linked below for you guys. I also want to say thank you to everyone who commented on the episode last week about your thoughts on iTunes and ads on YouTube and stuff like that. I really appreciate it. I do realize I probably wasn't very clear. I'm not going to be doing iTunes instead of YouTube. It will be in addition to YouTube. I don't think I'd ever stop doing YouTube. It just makes more sense and it's easier for now, and I know how it works. But in any case, it seems most of you prefer YouTube anyway. There were a few who were saying that, yeah, iTunes would make it easier for them, or this, that, and whatever. So it's definitely something I'm going to be looking into a bit more. I'm still not 100% sure on how to go about doing it, and what the best / easiest way is to do it. So I think I'm going to have to do a little bit more research in that department. But if you have any tips, or if you are a podcaster who uses iTunes, please do let me know. I'd really appreciate any advice on that part. Like I said, I'm not really too clear on how that all works. Okay, so both the boys have left me now. And right, we'll move on. So first, another little notice I wanted to give was the Knitting Games, which is being hosted by Melissa of the Spicy Homemaker podcast and Brittany of the Sip and Stitch podcast. And let me just double check quickly while I'm talking to you guys. They for May, the podcaster's challenge was to decorate a wooden animal, so either an alpaca or a wooden sheep. And Melissa sent me one. I'm not going to well, you guys, if you watched an earlier podcast episode, you'll have seen. I'm just trying to see. Okay, so it was supposed to go up yesterday. I'm just on Melissa's podcast group, so I'm not entirely sure if it's gone up yet or not. I can't see it there. But the voting thread is open now. There's, I think, 7 or 8 different podcasters that are taking part in this month's challenge to decorate a wooden animal, however you'd like, but it has to involve yarn in some way. And the voting was due to open yesterday. There will be voting threads in both Melissa's group, Spicy Homemaker podcast, and Brittany's group, the Sip and Stitch podcast. And the voting was supposed to open yesterday, May 3rd, and they will close the thread on Sunday, May 15th. And people can vote for their favourite animal by hitting the love button on the Ravelry under each picture. So, and then the podcaster with the most votes at the end will win the grand prize. The second prize goes to the second most votes. And then I think all the other podcasters get some yarn or goodies to give away to their viewers. So we're taking part to win prizes for you guys, which is great. So make sure you go and check those out. I will link both groups in the show notes for you, so you can, and hopefully if I find the threads, I'll link the threads directly as well, for you guys to go check those out. We also have a coupon code for the Primrose Yarn Company, which is owned by Kelsey, and that is Expat Knits in all capitals, and I'll pop that up on the screen for you guys, and that gives you 20% off at checkout until the 17th of May. Finally, the Budding Bluebells shawl pattern has finally been released. It's hanging up there behind me, and I just realised now that it's slightly off centre, but anyway, you get the gist. That's the Budding Bluebells shawl up in the background there, and the Knitalong has started. The Knitalong kicked off on the 1st of May, and I've been really excited to see everyone's progress so far, and the yarns that you guys have picked out, or the yarns that you've got from Nicole in the chatter thread and on Instagram, so that's been great. And remember, if you are taking part on Instagram, the hashtag there is Budding Bluebells Cal, and again I'll put that up on the screen here for you guys if I remember to do all of that. So thank you to everyone who's purchased the pattern so far, and to everyone who's been taking part and joining in. It's been a lot of fun, and it's a 2-month-long knit-along. It runs until the end of June, so you have plenty of time to come and join in and take part. And finally, I hit another pretty amazing milestone this week in terms of the YouTube and stuff. I hit 6,000 subscribers this week, which is insane, absolutely crazy. And so I just want to do a quick little giveaway just as a thank you to you guys, which I will show you later on in the episode in the relevant sections. So this week I will be starting off with some knitting stats for April, and since the month has ended, I kind of seem to be doing this every month now, and you guys seem to enjoy this segment, so that's come back this week. April knitting stats. Then we've got finished objects, works in progress, needle adjacents and stuff I've got planned coming up, acquisitions, knit-along and giveaway news, questions and answers section. I don't think I have a question for you guys this week unless I think of something during this episode. Bahrain Middle East live, and week in review. So let's get started. Okay. So April knitting stats. April was a good productive month, I think. I feel I definitely worked my way through quite a few projects that I'd been wanting to do. So I had 11 finished objects in April: 7 pairs of socks, 1 sweater, 1 hat, and 2 shawls. So that's and I also added a total of 44 squares to my blanket last month, although only 32 of them count for the blanket blitz cal, because the other 12 were done before that started, and the blanket blitz cal is being hosted by Shannon of Socksetra. So 44 squares for me equates to roughly just over 790 meters total of yarn added into my scrap blanket. That meterage doesn't count towards my amount of yarn knit out of my stash, because I don't count the scraps as stash. So when I come up to that, you'll see in a second. So I have 24 skeins that I used last month, and I now count as out of stash, because either whatever's left over is scraps or there's nothing left. And I only had 14 skeins come in, and that's not including skeins for giveaways and prizes, because I'm not counting that as stash, because it's not my stash. Hey Derek? Sniffling. Don't know if you heard him sneezing in the background there. So that's 14 skeins in and 24 out this month, which overall for April is good. It means I've used more than I brought in, but overall for the year I'm still have 41 skeins more than I did at the end of last year. So I'm working on bringing that down and getting into the minus numbers. Hopefully by the end of the year, I'll be at a lower number than I was last year. So we will see how that goes. And I've knit over 4,400 meters of yarn this last month, and that equates to over 1,500 grams, 1,500 grams of yarn knit. That's total weight of the finished projects added together, not the weights of the skeins of yarn. So I hope that makes sense. So those are my April knitting stats for you guys. I hope you find that interesting. You can sort of see the boys in the background. Hugo's there and Derek's on that side. toddling around. And yep, okay, so I'm going to pause and start a new segment, and I'll be back with you with finished objects. Alright, so back now with finished objects, and the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is the one I'm wearing. And I showed this to you last week, but I hadn't blocked it yet, so now that it's blocked and it's finished finally, this is my brownstone sweater that I knit by Jared Flood. It's a Brooklyn tweed pattern, and I love it, and it's nice and long. Like I said, I added about 1.5 inches to the length of the sleeves, but I didn't need to. It still would have been a good length, but I like my sleeves longer than usual, so that works fine for me. Yeah, and like I thought, the armhole depth is quite deep on this sweater. So my armhole's actually here, and this is where the sleeve joins. So there's quite a bit of extra space there, which I don't mind for like a nice sort of slouchy, comfy sweater to wear around the house. It's good and it suits me perfectly. And the ease, there's quite a bit of ease on this sweater as well, which again is fine. And that was kind of the look I was going for. And the pattern asks you to add a couple of toggles here to close it, but I find I quite like it open as it is, and it's fine again. Another reason why I wanted to talk about this was because this yarn bleeds like crazy, and I put up a short video on Instagram last week when I went to block this and another project out of this yarn, just to show you how badly this yarn bleeds. Like, you just hold it under the running water, you squeeze it, and it comes out like bright pink. And I soaked this in the bathtub, and it looked like I'd murdered someone. The bathtub was just full of blood. It was so bad. But yeah, so a few people suggested to soak it in vinegar, heat set it in the microwave, heat set it on the stove, citric acid, and all that sort of, all the usual stuff to set yarn, which I totally appreciate, and thank you for all the advice, and I will do. Citric acid is something I don't know if I can even get here. I've never seen it, and I'm not sure where to get it from if I do want to try and use that, but I can obviously do vinegar. That's not a problem. But the issue for me is how to heat set it. I don't know if I even have a pot big enough to fit this jumper in when it's soaked, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to heat it like throughout, like consistently in the microwave, because it'll be a big ball and stuff like that. So any advice on actually on a practical way to heat set this, I'm not entirely sure, but it gave off quite a bit of colour when I was knitting with it. It hasn't been giving off colour now that I've been wearing it. It's dyed one of my towels bright pink, which is fine. It's only a towel I use for blocking anyway, so it's okay. But yeah, so, and a few people suggested that I should get in touch with the dyer and let them know that this isn't acceptable and all of that, which is all well and good if I actually knew who made this yarn and who dyed it. It was a mystery pack of yarn that I picked up at I Knit Fandango last year from a, I can't remember who the vendor, I think it was like, it was at one of the booths, and they had this basket of sale yarn that they were just getting rid of, and there was no information about where this yarn had come from, who dyed it. I don't know if it's even superwash or not. It just said merino. It said it was DK weight. It's not. It's definitely worsted. So yeah, so I don't really know anything about it other than it's a merino yarn. That's basically the limit of my knowledge on this yarn. I don't know who dyed it or anything like that. It doesn't really look like it was heat set or that it was set properly at all. But anyway, all that to say, I did buy this yarn for £15, which is about $20. So you can't really go wrong for a sweater for $20 out of merino yarn, even if it does bleed a bit. It's something that can be solved. I'm not annoyed by that. I always expected this yarn to bleed. I always expected there to be some sort of problem with this yarn, considering how cheap it was and all of that. And this was only ever going to be a sweater for me to wear around the house, or if we go somewhere really cold, like we ever went back to Iceland, to wear as like a layer under a coat or something. I would never gift this yarn made out of this project to anyone else. Yeah, just because. Yeah, and I also got Perry to try it on because I wanted to see if this size garment fits him, because this was the size 43.5 inch size of the sweater that I knit, and it fit him fine. He had a couple of comments that he would things that he would change. Like he wouldn't want to have such a gap in that he would want the sleeve, the armhole to start like where the armhole should be, not so far down, and he'd want the sleeves to be a bit shorter, and he'd change a couple of other things, but otherwise the actual sizing of the sweater fit him fine. So it's good to know that in future, if I find a sweater pattern that he likes, I know what size to go for to fit him. And plus, I don't think I could ever knit him a sweater out of worsted weight. He'd never wear it. He gets too hot. I think the most I could get away with is sport weight, but I'd probably have to knit in fingering weight garments, which actually I don't mind. I don't mind knitting in fingering weight, anything, as long as he'd wear it. It'd be fine by me. And then anyway, so I finished this and I had just over 100 grams of the yarn left. So I made a hat. And yeah, I really love this hat. I'm probably going to be writing up the pattern and releasing it soon. I have a name for it, but I'm not announcing it yet because it's the stitch pattern from one of the socks that I'll be releasing soon. So you get a little bit of a sneak peek at that. So it's going to be the matching hat for that sock pattern. So yeah, and the way it's going to be written is, as you can see, there's ever so slight slouch at the back, depending on how you wear your hats. I always seem to wear my hats like this, where it covers my forehead and it covers my ears and the back of my head nicely, so it's nice and warm there. But I know some people wear their hats like further up here, in which case you get more of a slouch. I can't wear hats like this. I look ridiculous wearing hats like that. I don't get it. But it has a folded brim. See, so it's 2x2 folded brim, and that was just something I ended up doing on a whim because I don't like the hats where you knit the rib long enough to then fold it up, because I don't like having that cast on edge around the top. It looks weird. But so I decided to just try and do a folded brim because I really like the way that looks on the bottom, and the fact that you get the double thickness, and then you're not having to constantly worry about how much it's folded up and whether it's folded too high or too low, or you don't have to fiddle with it anymore. It's done and it's going to stay put. And yeah, for those really cold days you can pull it right down or you can have it further up, or however you like to wear it. And it's just got that little bit of slouch, which is great because it means if my hair is tied up in a bun, I can still wear this hat and it still covers my ears. Because sometimes what happens with hats is if my hair is tied up anyway, and I have quite thick hair, so there's quite a lot of it, if I have my hair tied up and I put a hat on, that the brim of the hat doesn't come down far enough because it's being like pulled back by the bun. So yeah, so this works really well and I really like it. And yeah, so like I said, I'll probably release this pattern around the same time as I release the socks, which should hopefully be before the end of the month if I can actually get my act together and just finalize those patterns and get them tested. I have a couple of testers lined up. I just need to get on with it. I don't know why I'm stalling. Crazy hair now. Yeah, anyway, so that's the matching hat to this jumper. I'll probably be knitting the hat one more time. I've made a couple of modifications to how I want to do it. So a couple of things I want to change. So I'm going to knit up another version of that, and then that should be out soon. And my last finished object for you guys this week are a pair of socks. It would be wrong if there wasn't a pair of finished socks each week. So this is Nomadic Yarns in the Get Lucky colorway on her Brit sock base, 80% superwash BFL, 20% nylon. You can see that there. And this is what's left. I wound off half of the skein to be able to do my socks 2 at a time, which is how I do them. And this is the finished pair of socks. Ta-da! Da-da-da-da-da-da. Dancing socks, which seems to be a thing. But yeah, so I really like how these have turned out. I did the purple contrasting heel, as I'd mentioned I was going to do. A few people had said they weren't sure how that would work, or they didn't think it would work until I posted a picture on Instagram, and then they saw how it worked. Because purple works really well with green. Purple and green are one of my favorite color combinations, and purple also works really well with black and sort of like golden and yellow tones as well. So I kind of thought that purple would work well with all of these colors, so that's why I went with purple. And so I also posted last week my tutorial on how to close the gap in the heel of socks. Now, with self-striping yarn, or any kind of yarn where you have distinct colour changes, you have to be careful with how you pick up those stitches. So if you've seen the video, you'll know what I mean. But on these socks, you can quite clearly see I wasn't paying attention to which stitch I picked up to close the gap. And there's just this little line of green going into the black stripe on both sides. And that's happened on the other sock as well. So I just wasn't paying attention. It's probably, you can see it better on this one. There's just that green there and green there. It doesn't bother me. It really isn't that big a deal. I could always take just a black Sharpie and just like color over that to change it. Not a big deal. It's going to be on my foot. It's going to be in a shoe. No one's going to really pay that much attention to it. But if it is something that bothers you, especially on a self-striping yarn that has thin stripes like this one, if it had thicker stripes, that probably wouldn't have happened. But because it's thinner stripes, it's happened. Just because of the way you pick up the stitch, you have to go down a couple of rows to pick up. So that might to pay attention to where you're picking up your stitches from. And in the video, I say you should go down 2 rows. It's not, you don't have to go down 2 rows. It's recommended. You can always go down a third or just the first row to pick up that stitch. So either way, it would work. So just something to bear in mind for self-striping yarns. If that bothers you, if that sort of thing bothers you. Yeah, so this was knit on 2.25mm US ones. I think that's really the only thing I'd say. Oh, the pattern is just my plain vanilla 2 at a time sock recipe. You can find that, it's a free download on Ravelry. It's Mina's 2 at a time socks. So that's that one. And yeah, I'm going to take another quick break. I need to get out of this because I'm overheating. I have the AC cranked up, but I'm still getting really hot in this. And I will be back with you in a second. Okay, I'm back now after a slight wardrobe change. Got rid of the jumper and put on my budding bluebell shawl for you guys to see up close. Sorry for the camera shake there. But see, Hugo is down there in his little box, napping away, being all cute and adorable. So he might come over later to say hi, and if not, it'll be the first time in a very long time since he's not been on the podcast. But as in up close. He's usually on every week. But anyway, so I should have probably cleared my desk a little bit. But anyway, moving on to works in progress. So the first thing I will talk about is my Cozy Memories blanket, because it's right here, and it is big, and it is cozy. I took it up to the bed actually at the end of the month to see how big it was compared to our bed, and it's almost the size of our bed. I could add a couple of squares width-wise and make it wider to fit up, but it's not going to be a bed blanket, this one. So it's probably about a queen size, I think, by the time it will be finished. Trying to figure out where. Okay, there we go. Is that right? Yeah. So this is the section that I added. So these 4 rows of 8 squares each. Right, yeah. So these 4 rows are the ones I've added. So last week when I showed you, I had these 3 squares added already. So I've added the rest of these. Okay, I'm going to try and show this to you in a way that makes sense. So between these 2 fingers, these 5 and the 5 below were all minis from Danny of Little Bobbins. This 5 and the 5 below are all minis from Andy of Andre C Knits, and you can totally see her dyeing style for these minis and how her colour sense is great. The colours are all very different, but the style of dyeing is all very similar, so they all feel very cohesive, which is really fun. And then the 4 in this column are all minis from Maria of Stitched in Sweden. She was another one. Her and Danny were the first 2 people I did mini swaps with. So that was also really fun. And most of her yarns were from Sweden or Scandinavian countries. Then these 8, so 2, 4, 6, 8 squares, were from Sam, who is Lavendaloon on Etsy. She dyes yarn, or she used to. I don't know if she is at the moment or not. but she sent me these minis, and this one is one of my favorites. This one is Socks That Rock, and I think this one was Republic of Wool. There was some difference. I think this was it this one? I think this one was I think this was the one that was hedgehog fibers, or was it this one? I can't remember now. One of these was hedgehog fibers. Yeah, and so there were loads of really fun yarns. I think this one was can't remember now. But there were definitely some yarns in here that I hadn't knit with before, and there was some fondant fibre in there somewhere. I think that one was fondant fibre. But yeah, so that's been really fun. And all my ends are woven in. I weave in all my ends. It's just this corner one because I've got nothing to weave it into. I always weave it into a seam. So yeah, nice and neat on the back there. At least that's what my back looks like, and I feel like it's neat enough. I actually switched what needles I was using to knit my squares on. I was using these bamboo 3mm needles, which up until last week I'd knit all my squares on these needles. Like I said, I used 3mm, and they were fine and they do the job, and you know they're okay, but they're very grippy. They're smooth, don't get me wrong, but they are very grippy when you knit with them. But I didn't have anything else, and I don't really want to use circulars because it's such a small row and the cable just gets in the way. I didn't really want to do that. It wasn't comfortable. But then I felt like my DPNs were too short. I don't use DPNs for much, but I do have a set of DPNs. I also have a 2mm size, which isn't in here. But I kind of felt like these were a little bit short for my squares, which are 49 stitches. So I thought I'd try it out anyway and see how it worked. And what I did was I popped on some panda stoppers at the top of my needles, and these are by Hi. They were gifted to me by the lovely Amber of Yarn Junkie in a swap. And and so I stuck those on there so my stitches couldn't fall off the end, and these are on pretty good. I mean, you have to really yank them to get the needle out, but you can. So pop them on one end, and so then you've got a couple of really short straights, and these are much more smooth and much more slick than the bamboo needles I was using. And I find that the squares fly off these a lot quicker, and I knit them quicker on these because there's less drag than with the bamboo ones. So there's a little tip for you guys. If you have DPNs but you don't have straights or something, you want to use DPNs, you can stick a couple of stoppers on the end to stop your stitches sliding off the other end. And then the other thing, I don't usually stop halfway through a square. I generally, if I'm going to knit a square, I knit it all the way through. But if I was to stop halfway through a square, you can just take the stopper off the other needle, stick it on the needle with the stitches, and then your stitches aren't going to go anywhere either, and then you can just put this away separately. But yeah, that also works to keep your stitches safe if you have to stop in the middle of a square for some reason. This way. So the next project to show you is in my little bobbins bag, sock bag, and this is another pair of socks, of course. This is one of my own designs, another one that will be coming up in the second collection. And this yarn, and you can see why this yarn had to live in this bag. It's basically made for each other. I'm not always very much into the whole matching your yarn to your project bag situation, but I feel like when it matches so perfectly, you just have to do what needs to be done and pair them up. So this yarn is by Circus Tonic Handmade, and this is her Revelry sock base. She's an Australian dyer, so it's 80% Australian superwash merino, 20% nylon, and the colourway is white browed wood swallow. It's a really lovely, very soft colours. It's a neutral base with really fun sort of speckled purples and greys, and there's bits of green in this one. So this sock has some green specks in it. This one hasn't had any green yet. I can tell this must be from the side of the skein, or the half of the skein that got the most dye compared to this one, just by the way they're knitting up so far. And the front is similar sort of colouring. There's more colour on this one than on this one for now. And this is what it looks like caked up. This yarn, I have to tell you, is some of the softest 80/20 yarn I've ever knit with. It is seriously soft stuff. her Revelry sock base. It's so soft, you'd swear it's cashmere in it, but there isn't any cashmere. It is just that soft. And it's a joy to knit with. It feels great running through your fingers and stuff, and it's not at all annoying. There are a couple of the other projects that I'm working on where the yarn isn't so soft, which is fine. You don't always have to knit with soft yarn, but it's nice to take a break and come back and knit on this for a while. It's just like a little bit of, it's just a break for your fingers, as it were. It's nice and soft. And these are being knit on US ones, 2.25 millimeter, and these are on my Knit Pro Zings, which I'm really, really enjoying. Yeah. Figure out where to put this so it's not in the way. Okay, so the next work in progress is a shawl design, and this one I really can't show you because it's a collaboration piece with and I'm not allowed to show you what it looks like. So, but I can talk to you about the yarn, because this isn't the yarn that's going to be the final. The design's not going to be knit out of this final yarn, if that makes sense. I am knitting them on Zings, giving these another go for shawls. I knit my hilltop shawl out of this with these needles, and I quite enjoyed it, so I'm using them for this one as well. So the yarn I'm using for this first sample, which is just to test out the pattern and see how it works, is going to be this amazing variegated rainbow loveliness, which is the By Knits Luna in Spiralicious colourway. It's the 100% superwash merino. Just really fun, sort of like cartoon rainbow colours. And then for the edging, use string everywhere. Hazel Knits Artisan Sock in Shady Verdant, and that's 90 superwash merino, 10 nylon. And these two work really well together, because I'm not sure how well it's going to come up on screen, but there are this exact shade of green is picked up in this in this yarn, in one of the shades of green, so they will work well together, and I am looking forward to seeing how this one pans out. I talked to you guys last week how the first version of this shawl just did not work out. The yarn was not right, the shaping wasn't right, it just wasn't working how it was supposed to. So I had to rip that all out and change yarns, change ideas a little bit on the shaping front, and giving it another go. So fingers crossed all goes well, and I'll be able to give you more information about it in a few months, I hope, when that pattern is closer to being released. Yeah. And the next work in progress that I have is another pair of socks. And these are a test knit that I'm doing for Nathan, who's the Sockmatician. He does the Sockmatician podcast and designs as a Sockmatician on Ravelry. And he's working on a formula for toe-up socks. And I haven't knit toe-up socks in over a year now. It's been about a year since I last knit toe-up socks. So I figured it's about time I give them a go again. So this is where I'm at so far. And so his recipe gives you a formula to use based on your foot measurements to determine how many stitches you cast on, how many, and then you increase to your stitch count, and then how long to knit the foot, and how to calculate how many gusset increases you need to do. It's a heel flap and gusset toe-up sock. So that's also new for me. I've never done that before. I've never done heel flap and gusset toe-up. And I haven't knit a heel flap sock since the end of last summer. So it's been a while. I'm enjoying picking these up and giving them a go. So the contrast, and I'm doing mine with contrast heel, toes and cuffs. And the contrast yarn I'm using is Drops Fable in the sort of heathered grey colour, which actually works really well with this yarn. And the yarn is a BFL nylon 3-ply handspun. And so these also will be my first handspun socks. And this was yarn sent to me by Sadie of Knitter's Nightmare. She actually spun the yarn herself and used the yarn to knit a pair of socks. But she had, I think there was almost 70 grams left over, 68 grams or something left over. So she sent that to me to use. And it's another example of why toe-up socks are great, because I don't know what the yardage is. It's handspun. She didn't tell me how many yards or meters were left. So by doing them toe-up, I just go as far as I can. And then I wind off when I'm done. So looking forward to that. and working. I'm about halfway through the foot at this point. I think I have about another 10 to 15 rounds to go before I start my gusset increases, and then the heel. So far so good. I've been chatting with Nathan back and forth a bit about pattern and gauge, and there's been a bit of discussion about how much negative ease you'd like in socks. I personally prefer at least 2 inches of negative ease in my socks around my foot. I've spoken about this many times before, that I find over time my socks loosen up. So if I have quite a bit of negative ease to begin with, then they don't get as baggy over time. So that just works for me. Everyone has their own personal preferences of what they prefer, but about 2 inches is good for me. So, and even as it is, using Nathan's calculations with his gauge, with my gauge and the calculated stitch count with the negative ease, these are still turning out to be ever so slightly bigger than my usual socks that I knit. So we will see. If these end up being too big for me, I might give them to my dad, or I might just wear them as house socks. It depends how long I can make the leg. My dad really likes a long leg on his socks, so if these end up being short socks, then I'll keep them for myself. And my final work in progress is something that was inspired by Sarah of Yarn Lab Canada. And she has recently finished knitting this small baby blanket using a short row technique, and it creates a really fun effect. And the pattern is by Karen. Let me just check what it's called. It is called Country Quilt Baby Blanket, and I'll link it in the show notes. It's a free pattern you can find online, and it's effective. It's a pinwheel effect that you get. So I've done 1 square, and the pattern calls for you to do 9 squares and seam them together, and you do a border and whatever to make it a blanket. Now, and I remember if I told you, I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned either last week or the week before that I had a bunch of palette yarn, Knit Picks palette, that I wanted to use up in rainbow colours, and I realised I wasn't going to be using it for the things that I originally planned to use it for. So, and I wanted to get rid of it, and not just get rid of it, but I wanted to use it for something that I would actually want. So what I decided to do, I'd hold it double, and I would knit the pinwheel squares a little bit larger. So the pattern calls, it's a free pattern, so no big deal, calls for worsted weight yarn 5mm needles, and you are supposed to cast on 25 stitches. I cast on 30. It's the same size needles, and with palette held double gives you a good sort of worsted weight size. And again, the pinwheels in the pattern are done in only 2 colours, so you just alternate colours, and I just used 8 different colours in mine to get a nice sort of rainbow colour wheel effect. And I have a few of these cushion forms, pillow forms. So what I'm going to do is just take two squares, one for the front, one for the back, and then seam them together around the edge. We'll see how it goes once they're done. I think there's going to be, the squares are 40, the pillows are 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters, and my squares are blocking out to 39 by 39 centimeters, which is fine, because then it means when you seam them together, they stretch out just enough to sort of sit snugly, and they're not going to be baggy. The pillow's not going to be loose inside the covers. And I have, in each ball or palette is 50 grams. My 2 blues were about 5-6 grams light, because I'd used them for a different project. But so I had about 45 grams of each of these. And each of these triangles takes, with the yarn held double, uses up 10 grams of palette. So I have enough to make 4 of these, and there'll be some left over of the other colours. But yeah, so I have enough to make 4 of these, which is great for 2 pillows. So that is going to be my rainbow project that I alluded to on Instagram. And thank you to Sarah for the inspiration to get that started. And that project is living in my rainbow project bag, because of course it is. And it's just got all my balls of palette and my needles and stuff in there. I still need to cast on the next square, but I did that and I blocked it just to check the final measurement and stuff. So that's good. And each of these triangles takes about half an hour to knit. So this is a 4-hour square, which isn't bad, to be honest. It's quite a quick project in that regard, especially if you're only doing 4. So that's 16 hours, which is quite a lot of time But if you spread it out, it's good. I can pick it up and just do a colour when I've got half an hour spare here or there. If I'm watching a TV programme or something, I can get one triangle done. And so yeah, that's that. And I'm looking forward to getting a couple of cushions done. I think that's really the first time I'm knitting something for the home and not a garment type thing. I think. I'm not entirely sure now. No, I've knit a couple of blankets before, but other than that, Hugo's left. I was knitting that project when looking after the little ginger kitty. He's been staying with us. If you watched last week, you'll know who I'm talking about. And I took some footage of like me knitting on this whilst he sat on my lap, and it's really quite funny. So I will pop in some of that footage in here for you guys. Alright. Oh, and the only other thing, sorry, I forgot to mention, the only other thing that I'm doing differently on this square than the pattern calls for is the pattern calls for using wrap and turns for the short rows. And I did German short rows. I substituted in German short rows. It's just my preferred method. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing, I was watching a few podcasters last week, and a couple of them brought up this topic. And it was Marsha from Twitch and Stitch and Devon from Francophone Knits both sort of touched on the subject of about colour and embracing your favourite colours. And a lot of people talk about going outside of their comfort zone with colours and trying to pick colours that they normally wouldn't go for. And I totally agree with Marsha and Devon. Just embrace your colour palette, embrace it. It is what it is, and enjoy it for what it is. And rainbow is very much my colour palette. I am embracing my colour palette. I don't think I've ever not embraced my colour palette, to be honest. I've never apologised for being a fan of rainbow colours and bright colours and stuff like that. But I do sometimes find myself thinking, oh, I should probably go for something a bit different. But if I like what I like, then that's not a bad thing. Sometimes I might need to think about what other people like if I want to knit for other people. But for the most part, I like what I like, and that's fine. I think I have a pretty good range of colours up there, so it's all good. Right, and so now we will move on to needle adjacent stuff. So I have borrowed my husband's iPad so I can actually show you some things on Ravelry on here. Hopefully that all works. So first up is the sweater for this month. And what I'm trying to do is to knit a sweater every month. Some months I might not be able to, that's fine. But the aim is if I start a sweater in a month, I will finish it that month. That is the hope. So far I've knit 3 sweaters or 3 jumpers this year, cardigans, 2 cardigans and 1 jumper. One jumper. But and then obviously I didn't knit anything in January because it was just all socks all the time. And if you don't know what I'm on about, where have you been? No, just go back to one of my January podcast episodes and you will know what I'm talking about if you're new. So this sweater that I'm going to be knitting is another pullover style, which is different for me. I normally only go for cardigans, and I'll tell you why I'm knitting this one. This is the Mark Lee by Elizabeth Doherty. And Elizabeth was actually at the Curious Handmade Country House Retreat last month, or 2 months ago now, almost. And she was an incredible person to talk to. Learned a lot from her. We had some really interesting conversations about gauge and garment knitting and stuff like that. And she designs a lot of garments. And she designs as the Blue Bee Studio on Ravelry, and the Markley was one of her recent sweaters that she's designed, and she brought the sample with her to the retreat. So we all got to see it in person, and a bunch of us tried it on. And she refers to it. This is the jumper. I'm sorry about the glare, but she refers to this as her magic sweater, and it is magic. It looks good on everybody. In that one size, it looks good. It looks amazing on everybody. So. So Maya from the Wool Barn, she tried it on, and she is tiny compared to me. She is not just height-wise, but like she's a lot slimmer than me, at least like 3 or 4 dress sizes smaller than me. But we both put it on, and it looked great on both of us. And I was just like, this sweater is magic. It has to be knit. And Elizabeth was very sweet and gifted me the pattern whilst we were there. And it has some really interesting sort of features on the garment as well, like this back. Sort of, that sort of braid feature across the back looks really interesting, and it's knit all in one piece. From what I think it is. Yeah, it's all in one piece for the most part. I believe it's top down. It's kind of got this drop sleeve, sort of boxy-ish shape. Yeah, so I love all the details, and it's a very simple garment, but it's got a lot of interesting details. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be knitting, and I'll be knitting it out of Plucky. So this is Plucky Primo Fingering, 75 superwash merino, 20% cashmere, 5% nylon, in the Gilded Age colourway. It's beautiful golden yellow. I have 4 skeins of this, which I picked up at the Plucky Trunk Show at Gauge Intention last year, which is really sad that Gauge Intention is now closed, and I'm really sad I'm never going to be able to go back there again. But I'm really glad that I had been the number of times I have been, and that I got some Plucky while I was there. Or that I was there for their trunk show, because I hear this stuff is really difficult to get hold of. But yeah, I have plenty to knit. What was it? I think it was a size up from the one that she had brought. Let me see. Which size was it? Yeah. Yes. So I was going to knit the size up from the sample size that she brought. I believe it was a size up. I have enough yarn for that, with a little bit left over, because I'm probably going to be making mine longer, both in the sleeves and in the body, because I always end up doing that, because I'm just a tall person. And yeah, so that's an upcoming plan for this month as well. I have a couple of other things planned, but this was like a big one that I kind of wanted to talk a bit about, and reasons why I want to knit it and stuff like that. And if you haven't checked out Elizabeth's patterns on Ravelry, you should. She has some beautiful designs. Beautiful sweaters. Yeah. Then I was also very kindly gifted the Duchess of Devonshire shawl, designed by Kay Jones of Bakery Bears fame, by the lovely Sarah. And I'm not going to say her surname in case she doesn't want to be mentioned, but thank you so much, Sarah. You know who you are, and I really appreciate it. It's definitely one I'm going to be knitting soon. I'm working on knitting shawls as gifts for my girlfriends this year, and I'm looking for nice sort of simple classic designs that aren't going to be too over the top or like overly lacy. I want them to be very sort of easy to wear everyday type of shawl patterns that they can wear comfortably without having to think too much about it. And I think the Duchess of Devonshire shawl is going to be a good one to use for that as well. So that'll be something that comes up on my needles at some point in the future. I'm not sure exactly when yet. But yeah, okay. I am going to move on to acquisitions. And I only have one package. It's not small. One package to show you guys this week. And I didn't have anything until I was like, okay, I'm going to have nothing to show this week. It's going to be a change. But I went to the post office yesterday, and this box of goodies was waiting for me there. So thank you so much to Ashley. I'm not going to say your Ravelry name or anything, so I don't know if you want to be mentioned or not, but thank you so much, Ashley. This is the cute little thank you card. She's a little kitty cat. Yeah, so if you saw on Instagram yesterday, I put a picture up of everything I put together in preparation for filming the podcast today on my sewing table, and the boys were both just sort of like investigating and being all inquisitive about it. I didn't realise until this morning when Derek was really insistent on like getting into all of my stuff, and he was basically sat on this box with his head in it, and I realised there were cat toys in here, and I think one of them has catnip in it, so that's kind of why they were going crazy for it all. So yeah, there's a catnip filled. This has catnip in it. So they've been sniffing this out and wanting to get into it. So I'll be giving them some of these after to play with after I'm finished recording. But so Ashley got in touch with me a few weeks ago now when that one episode where I was talking about finding blue yarn for Perry. And so many of you came back to me with amazing suggestions and stuff. And Ashley got in touch with me saying that she had the perfect yarn that she wanted to send me, and could she send it? And I said, yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. That'd be amazing. So here I am, just expecting one skein of yarn. That's it. That's all I was expecting. Seriously, honestly, Ashley, knitters in general are just amazing people. So the yarn that she sent me, this was all I was expecting, was a skein of Tannis Fibre Arts in their blue label fingering weight, 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon. It's 115 grams, 385 meters, and it is in the cobalt colorway. It's this beautiful bright blue. It's got a little hint of purple in there, some darker blues, but it's really vibrant, really beautiful colors. And I showed it to Perry and he loved it, and he was like, yep, socks, this, me. I'm like, great, found it, found the perfect skein for him, and he will finally get his blue socks. But she also sent this yarn as a backup in case Perry didn't like this one, which was very sweet of her. It is a Wild Foot luxury sock yarn, 75% superwashable, 25% nylon, and it is surfboard blue, and it's spun and dyed by Brown Sheep Company in Nebraska. There's this really sort of bright blue colour, really fun, and it's a more rustic feeling yarn. It feels more like a red or opal, but as she says that this softens up quite nicely with washing. So, but Perry said he preferred this colour, so he'll get that, and this will be used for something else. And no, that was not all she sent me, because she's ridiculously generous. Sorry. She sent me this skein of Friends in Fibre yarn. It's superwash Corridel nylon 75-25. It's a 3-ply, and the colorway is Fibre Jewels. And she said she had to send this to me because it was just my colors. And you're totally right. These are just my colors. And soft and squishy, and it's not that soft. It's Corridel, so it's not the softest, but it is not by no means scratchy. And again, it's one that will soften up with washing, I imagine. So that would be really fun. And the final thing she sent me, and this literally just made me squee out loud, because she sent me turtle pearl yarns, which is amazing in itself. It's beautiful yarn. And I have a skein of the Om colorway, which Eric sent me from Six for Twine. And this one is in the Rainbow Bright colorway. And she sent this to me because she was like, she couldn't help herself, because I was also, she's also a fellow lover of the Rainbow Bright TV show when we were kids. Yeah, so that's another really fun rainbow colored yarn, which I love. So thank you so much, Ashley. That's all amazing and greatly appreciated. Really, you went above and beyond. Everything is just ridiculous. But thank you so much. I really, really genuinely appreciate all of it. Again. So now we are moving on to Knitalong news and giveaways. Again, like always, we have the Sweater Knitalong going on in the group. You can check out the threads for more information about that. There are lots of really amazing sweaters going on and being entered in the FO thread. Lots of great chatter going on in the chatter thread, and loads of people there to help out if you have any questions and stuff. Usually, even if I haven't had time yet to go in and check and answer any questions, someone else will have jumped in and answered. So if you're having any trouble with garments and stuff, it's definitely a thread to check out. Really inspirational stuff going on in there. Then we have the Expat Yarn Cal going on, which is going on until the end of May. So you still have plenty of time to take part. You don't have to have taken part in the swap to take part in the Knitalong. All you have to do is knit with yarn that's not from where you are. So yeah, please come along and take part in that. Again, prizes are listed in the FO and chatter threads, and rules and everything are all in the threads in the group. We have the Budding Bluebells Cal, which has now started, and this is the shawl. Sorry, I'm just really in love with this one. Yeah, so the rules and everything again are listed in the chatter thread. I will be hosting the chatter thread in my group, and Nicole of Loco is hosting the finished objects thread in her group. So make sure you join both groups and you're keeping tabs on both. Nicole will be donating some prizes, and so will I. I've sent Nicole photos of the prizes that I will be donating, so she should be putting those pictures in the finished objects thread as well, so you guys can see what's up for grabs. There's going to be yarn, bags, and some other goodies thrown in each package that I'm donating for the prize pool. And like I mentioned earlier, I am going to be doing a 6,000 subscriber giveaway, and this I try to be quite thoughtful about the stuff I put together for this package to sort of encompass all the things that I personally enjoy the most with my knitting, and therefore I hope, since you guys watch the podcast, that you will also enjoy and that are relevant to the podcast in some respects. So we have 2 skeins of Patterns Croy socks in the Clover colourway, and I used this yarn to knit the very first pair of socks that I knit in the January Sockathon, so I thought that was somewhat relevant. We have a sock blank dyed by Andy of Andre C Knits. It's a really beautiful sort of colour gradient. It is a gradient yarn. It starts from purple, it goes to grey, and it runs through all these different beautiful shades of purples and with bits of blues and greys in there. And there's some speckling as well in parts, which is fun as well. And so this sock blank would work really well for a shawl because it's a gradient. You can mix it, you can pair it with another grey or purple to do a 2-colour shawl, or you can do it as a single colour shawl. This would work amazingly in the Le Moelleux shawl as a gradient with a neutral solid colour. That would look great in that. So again, I thought it was relevant because this is great for shawls, and I love gradients, and obviously purple. So thought that was a good one. Then we have this adorable little notebook, which was made hand bound by the lovely Grace of Babel's Travelling Yarn. Don't know why I struggle so much with that podcast name. It's not that difficult. But yeah, so Grace used to be, I don't know if she still does anymore. Well, she's travelling now, so I assume she doesn't at the moment. But she was really into hand binding books and notebooks and stuff. And so she sent me a bunch of things before she left to go travelling at the end of last year. She sent me a package with some fabrics and a couple of notebooks and other things. So, and so this is one of the things that she donated to the podcast. And yeah, so this will also be as part of the prize, because frankly a notebook is always handy to have around, and I am always carrying a notebook with me. It's really useful to have. And finally, a tote bag, and this is from I Knit, or it says I Knit Fandango from the festival they had last year. But tote bags, incredibly handy. I almost always have a tote bag in my handbag when I go out of the house. It's handy if you're going shopping or whatever, to just have an extra bag on you or whatever. So, or just to carry your projects in. So this will be the little prize bundle for the 6,000 subscriber giveaway. So thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed and watches the podcast each week. It seriously blows my mind that so many people are interested in what I have to say. So that's a quick little thank you. And the prompt for the thread is going to be, just tell me something about your knitting journey. It could be anything. It could be how you started, could be what you're currently working on, anything to do with your current knitting journey and you and your knitting, basically. It is specifically that vague and that open-ended, so you can basically say whatever you want to enter for a prize. You just have to be a member of the group, and the thread will close on the 15th of May, so that gives me enough time to draw a winner and everything, and not to make a big fool of myself like I did last time when I drew prizes and make a big mess of it all. To give myself some time to do that before the morning of the podcast, so I am not a big mess. So yes, the thread will close on 15th of May, and hopefully by the time this podcast is up, I will have remembered and I will have posted the entry thread in the group. Okay, so we will now move on to the questions and answer section. The first question is from Izzy Beth, and that's Liz, and she asks, I've always wanted to ask, why do you live in Bahrain if Perry works in Saudi Arabia and has a long commute? Okay, it's actually a very simple answer in some respects. Neither of us want to live in Saudi Arabia. It's Saudi Arabia, and it's very, it's not somewhere I want to live. I wouldn't be able to drive there. I would basically be stuck at home all the time, unless Perry was there to take me out. So whenever he's working, I'd be stuck at home. There are compounds and places where you can live where they are large compounds. It basically feels like a mini city, and you have everything you need in there. Like they have supermarkets and schools and stuff all within the compound. And on the compounds, you could drive, because there'll be expat compounds specifically. But it's not the kind of life we wanted. I didn't really want to be somewhere where I would, where I feel so restricted, and not even in the dress code. The dress code does not bother me at all. Like wearing an abaya is not the end of the world, which is the black gown outfit thing that you have to wear in Saudi Arabia if you're a woman. It's really not the dress code. It is totally the lack of being able to do anything, really. And it's not really the kind of, it just really isn't, it was never on the table, let's put it that way. The idea of living in Saudi Arabia was never on the cards. When Perry first started working for this company, we lived in Dubai. And for about 6 to 8 months, that's how we did it. We lived in Dubai, and Perry flew out Sunday morning. The work week in the Middle East is Sunday to Thursday. So Perry would fly out Sunday morning, and he'd come home Thursday night, and he'd stay in Saudi Arabia during the work week, and he'd be home for the weekends. We did that for about 6 to 8 months, and actually for a few months longer when he was working for his previous company, and he was the company he now works for was his previous company's client. I hope that wasn't too confusing. But anyway, so it's been going on for quite a while. We'd gotten used to living that way for about over 8 months by that point. And we just decided that wasn't what we wanted. We also decided that Saudi Arabia was not on the cards. It wasn't something we wanted to do. So moving to Bahrain was the most obvious solution, or was the most reasonable solution. I'd have the freedom to do what I wanted, drive, wear what I wanted, and have the same freedoms I had when we lived in Dubai. Like it wasn't going to affect my life or our lives, or our living standards in any way in that respect, to the things that we were used to. And there's nothing wrong with it. Plenty of people live in Saudi Arabia and have, like expats, have lived in Saudi Arabia and have had a great time, and it's okay. It's just not something we wanted to do, especially because we don't have any children. So socializing is a bit difficult in that way as well. At least if you have children, you have a reason to socialize with other families and stuff. I don't know. It was just one of those things. I don't think it was ever on the card for us to think about actually living there. Yeah, and I actually get that question a few times here. It was really funny. The guys at the post office sort of joke with me about it, and they ask me, oh, so why don't you want to live in Saudi Arabia? And I look at them and I'm just like, you really have to ask why? You really have to ask why I don't want to live there? But it's not a bad country. Like, I don't mind going there. I don't think I'd want to live there. And I mean, if we had no other choice, then of course we'd have probably considered it. But it's and it's not that long a commute. His commute isn't that bad. Distance-wise, it's about 45 kilometers door to door, so it's not the worst thing in the world. But the problem is the border, because he has to cross an international border every time he comes and goes. That is what slows it down. The actual driving doesn't take any time at all. If he could just drive door to door without crossing a border, he'd be like half an hour. But it's the border crossing that slows things down, and makes it take longer. So depending on how busy that is. So that's why. I hope that answers your question. And then Knit in Solitude, Dietrich asks, thank you for the tutorial on how to close the gap in the heel corner. That's very helpful. I was wondering how you do that when you knit a contrasting heel. How do you handle the colour transition? Do you knit the first stitch when changing the colour with the yarn held double, meaning the old and new colour together? Or two, and the second question is, do you use the method for closing the gap with contrasting heel as well, or does this mess up the clean separation of the two colours? So I'll bring you back to my finished object, because that was done with a contrasting heel on striped socks. So I think that kind of helps answer that question a little bit. So when you're starting the heel, so I always do the heel on the back of the sock. So when you're knitting, the first half that you knit on magic loop anyway is what I would call the front, and then the back is the second half. So what I do is when I'm ready to start the heel, I knit the first half of the stitches, the front half with the working yarn, the colour, the stripe yarn, and then I start knitting the first row of the heel side in the contrast colour for the heel, and then I just go back and forth knitting the heel until you get to the last row. And then when you get to the last row of the heel, and the last row is the one I mean when you knit that last row and then you go back to joining into the round. You're not then going back and forth anymore. So at that point, before you start that last round finishing the heel, you'll notice that your main working yarn will be on that side of the sock. Will be on that side of the sock. So then you just drop the contrast colour, or cut the contrast colour, and you pick up the main colour, and you join back in the round, and you pick up that main colour, and you knit that last round, you join back in the round, and then you keep going, and that maintains the stripe, and that's how I do the contrast colour. And yes, like you can see, I do still pick up the stitch and close the gap in the same way. This was the first time I had done it myself in self-striping, so you can see it does. If you have thin stripes, it will affect, or it could, it won't always, but it could affect the stripe. There, see that little stitch line there? I think this one was the more obvious one. Yeah, you can see that clearly there. But if you had thicker stripes, that wouldn't be a problem. That probably wouldn't happen. Or if you were careful about where you picked up that stitch from, that you didn't pick up a different colour stitch than the yarn you were knitting with, then that wouldn't happen either. But yeah, so that's just something to bear in mind. It can happen, doesn't always happen. You can always try a different method of picking up and closing the hole. You don't, the way that I show in that tutorial isn't the only way to do it. It's just one way that I find I quite like. So I hope that answers your question on that one. Or answers both of your questions on that one. Like I said, don't have a question for you guys this week. I really can't think of anything else that I had to ask you at the moment. And on to Bahrain/Middle East life. Again, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll have seen that I had a bit of an incident this last week. It's something that I've always been worried about doing since we moved here. There's a highway that crosses Bahrain. Actually, you know what? I have the iPad. I can show you on a map while I'm talking. There's a highway that goes across Bahrain, and it then basically turns into the causeway that goes to Saudi Arabia. So, and I've always been worried that I would accidentally miss the last exit and head to Saudi Arabia when I'm driving, because to be honest, it's not well signposted at all. So let me just zoom out a bit here. Okay, that's a bit too far probably. So this green road here is the highway that I'm talking about, and the blue dot is where I am now, so that's where we live. So, it's very close to the causeway. So I was coming home one day and I missed this last exit. Is that the one? Yeah. So that's that green line here. That's the last exit that I would have had to take in to come home. And I missed it, like I said, really badly signposted. And I ended up driving down here. Thankfully, I noticed pretty soon after. And I stopped about here-ish. And there's a couple of insurance kiosks where if you're driving and you don't have Saudi car insurance, then you can pull in and get insurance before you go, before you cross the border. And so I pulled over, I got out the car, and I went to speak to someone. I found someone to help me, and I was like, I made a mistake. I need to go home. I clearly cannot go to Saudi Arabia because not only was I not dressed correctly, I did not have my passport, and the fact that I'm a woman driving. The three things that are not going to let me into the country. And the thing was, I was never going to end up in Saudi Arabia. I would have been turned around at the border, but I just didn't want to go that far to get turned around at the border because it's just, and there was a lot of traffic as well that day. But as it turns out, it's not very clear on here. So I stopped about here. And so as it turns out, there's this little U-turn that I can take to get back home, which wasn't very clear at all because there were so many cars parked around there on the side. It looked like a big car park. And the guy was like, yeah, you just need to reverse up the highway, that little bit, to get to that turn off to be able to take that U-turn and get back. So rather precariously, I had to reverse about 100 meters back up the highway against traffic to get to that U-turn and then manage to get home. So it was fine in the end. It was just one of those, crap, I can't believe I did that. But after a year of living here, I have to say I'm surprised it hasn't happened sooner. But yeah, so that was my little incident for the week, I guess. I don't have any footage to show you guys this week for stuff out and about in Bahrain. Been home a lot, and with the little kitten and everything, it's just been a little bit busy. And so with that, we will move on to week in review. And week in review, I'll start out by saying I have straight hair again this week. It's a bit different than last time because I've only just straightened it this morning before I started recording, so it's very straight right now. I actually don't really like my hair when it's this straight because it looks unnaturally straight. Whereas last time when I recorded with my hair straightened a couple of weeks ago, I'd slept on it, and that was my hair the day after I'd straightened it. And I find it always looks a lot more natural after I've slept on it. And because, it gets a couple of those natural waves, and not wavy at all, but it gets like a natural curve in the hair, from where it's been tucked behind the ear all day, or you run your hands through it a couple times, and it just gets a bit more shape to it, so it's not just like this like straight down hair. And so yeah, it's kind of, that's why I've been playing with it a lot. I'm really sorry if that bugs anybody, but yeah, it just feels a little bit too straight at the moment, but I'll love it tomorrow. So yeah, so little Ginger, he was incredibly distracting last week, which is why I'm not filming in that room today. And also there was sound issues and stuff last week, so I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, so there was a few things I had wanted to mention last week, which I never got around to mentioning because he was so distracting and I forgot. He's not microchipped. When I took him to the vets, they checked. He's not microchipped, which apparently is very common here. In Dubai, they're a lot better about making sure pets are microchipped when you take them home, but over here they're not microchipped very often unless they're going to be moved internationally or they've come from abroad. Which is a shame, which means we're not going to be able to find his owners if he had any to begin with, and so as much as we would love to keep him, we're going to have to find him a new home. We would love to keep him. I would love to keep him. He is so cuddly and a really, really sweet cat. He would make a great family pet. There are a lot of reasons why. One, because I think once you hit 3 cats, everything gets a little bit more complicated. Right now, we live in a large enough home that 3 cats would be fine, but I don't want to say too much right now because nothing is certain, but we're not going to be in Bahrain forever. We're not going to be here for much longer as it is. We're not entirely sure what the next step is. There's a few things potentially in the pipeline, but there is nothing set in stone, nothing even remotely certain at the moment at all. So with that level of uncertainty, it's hard to take on the responsibility of another cat. Also, wherever we move to next, it is almost 90% certain that we're not going to have a living situation like we do now. We're not going to have as much space. We're not going to have as big a home, I don't imagine. So as it is, I feel guilty enough about moving our 2 boys into a smaller apartment or a smaller home. And then on top of that, to add a 3rd cat to the mix, it just feels like it's going to be too stressful a situation. And Derek he gets ill when he's stressed. He's had it a couple of times now. He's had stress-related colitis, which is basically like a UTI for cats, and his is stress-induced. There's no real reasoning behind it other than if he's stressed or gets a lot of anxiety, he develops that issue, and it can be quite dangerous for cats to have that. So I need to be careful about, trying not to get him too stressed out and putting him in stressful situations. So as much as the only thing that would really sort of potentially change our minds about it is if the boys get on with the kitten, and if the kitten gets on with the boys like really well. Like if I walk into the room and I find them snuggling next to each other sort of well, which is highly unlikely, to be honest, but that'd really be the only reason to change it. If they got on amazingly well and everything was okay. But as it is, I just think that it's not fair on the kitten to put him in that situation, and I don't think it's fair on our boys either to put them in. I mean, that's really the reason we even stopped fostering. We used to foster cats all the time, but we stopped doing that because it was giving Derek like extreme anxiety. Like he stopped eating food, and he was being very, he lost weight. He wasn't doing well. He did not like the fact there were other cats in the house that he couldn't see, and it was stressing him out too much. So, as much as I'd like to keep him, it's just not fair on our boys to do that to them, and it's not fair on the kitten to put him in a stressful situation either. But so, like I said, we're going to be looking to rehome him. I took him in for vaccinations yesterday, and he's doing well. He's doing okay. He's got a bit of he's got swollen gums, not like massively swollen, but they're a little bit swollen, a little bit inflamed. But his teeth are like very clean. There's no plaque, there's no damage to his teeth at all. Like his teeth are very clean. So the vet can't quite figure out what it is. It's not like it's a rotten tooth or anything. But I know he has a bit of pain when he eats because he sort of has pain. You can tell when they cry out. But he still eats fine, so there's no issues there. So yeah, we're not entirely sure what we'll do if we can't find him a home. I'll be putting up adoption notices at some of the local supermarkets and at the local vets and stuff like that to see if anyone's interested. Pets do get adopted all the time, but there is also a shelter in Bahrain. It's the BSPCA, which is affiliated with the RSPCA in the UK, so they kind of have the same sort of standards as the RSPCA, which is great. So I think for us the limit's going to be probably by the summer, by mid-July. If we haven't been able to find him a home, then I'm probably going to have to take him to the shelter because I'm going to be gone for 5 weeks over the summer. And Perry's not going to be here all the time either. He's going to be coming and going a lot. So it would really depend on how well he gets on with the boys. And also, I also totally get that he has the best chance of getting adopted while he's still a kitten, while he's still young. So I'm going to give it a couple months. We need to get him neutered and stuff. So that'll be happening over the next few weeks at some point. But yeah, we need to find him a home as soon as possible. Perry's going to be talking to some of his colleagues and see if anyone is looking for a pet who lives in Bahrain, and I'll be putting up notices around and things. So fingers crossed that we'll find him a lovely home. He'd be a great family pet, to be honest. He's not scared of strangers at all. I think he'd be great with kids. He doesn't really bite or scratch unless you provoke it, which is the same for most cats, to be honest. My boys are just weird. But yeah, no, he's very, very sweet, very loving. And it's a bit sad, to be honest, to have to think about giving him away, but it's the right thing to do by him and by our boys as well. But it's been quite funny because a few people on Instagram have been suggesting that we name him Weasley. And there's a reason why I haven't named him, is because I don't want to get too attached, but Weasley would be an amazing name for him. And Perry came up with Butter Knife. The reason behind Butter Knife was because Perry's just like, I don't know how you do it, but you always seem to attract like the softest, least vicious animals ever. And I was just saying, because the vicious ones won't let me near them. But so he was like, he calls him Butter Knife because it's like the least scary of all the knives that you could possibly find. Is a butter knife. Like, you can't do any damage with a butter knife. And so he was joking, like, he was like, yeah, that'd be his gang name, would be Butter Knife. So jokingly been referring to him as Weasley Butter Knife. The least vicious and least scary cat around. So yeah, I just thought that was funny. But yeah, like I said, we're not naming him officially because I don't want to once you name him, then it becomes then you get really attached to them. But yeah, so, and on that note, we did start introducing them to the boys last night. It went pretty well, actually, I think. We started by just doing it through the door, got some treats involved. I mean, most of the things in the room with the cat belong to the boys in the first place. There's a cat tree in there and some boxes and things, and all of them smell like the boys because it belonged to the boys before. And the boys have been smelling the kitten on me and on Perry and stuff after we come out there. So they're both used to each other's smells. So we started doing it through the door, had the door open a crack, and Perry was there like feeding our boys treats, and I was like stroking the kitten and stuff. And so yeah, you could see they were starting to see each other and smell each other and look at each other and get closer to each other that way. And then after a while, the kitten was like, okay, I've had enough now, and he went off. And we had a beanbag. I put the beanbag in that room so it's somewhere for me to sit when I'm in there. And he went and he sat on the beanbag, which is at the opposite side of the room from where the door is. So at that point, Perry sort of opened the door a little bit, and then Hugo came in and Derek came in, and neither of them went up to the kitten straight away. They both went straight into the bathroom. So that room has an ensuite, which is where the litter tray is, and his food and all that sort of stuff are in there. And so they went straight in there and sniffed around a bit, sniffed at his food, sniffed at his litter trays, or just smelling everything, doing what they do. And they sort of came back round. They started coming closer to the beanbag when the kitten was just watching them the whole time. He wasn't running away. He wasn't hiding. He was just sat there watching. And if they got a bit too close, he'd start like growling and hissing at them. And then Hugo hissed back a couple of times. But Derek was just kind of like, right, I've had enough. I'm going to go now. Derek does not do confrontation. He's a lot like me. I'm not very good with confrontation. So Derek just left. And then Hugo sort of hung around a little bit longer. He left at one point and came back again. And so the two of them, Hugo and the kitten, were sort of growling and hissing at each other a little bit. But, there was no fighting. No one lashed at each other. No one... it was nothing really aggressive. It was more just... They were just asserting themselves. Letting them know that, I'm fine with you here, but don't push it. Which is all good. Other than that, it wasn't a particularly eventful week. Perry got back from his trip, which went really well. He had a really good time, other than the fact that he didn't have a jacket, so he was freezing for most of it. There was one night when after Perry got back, it was just a couple nights ago, when we were watching TV. I don't know where it came from. Really have no idea. This giant moth, literally the biggest thing in the world. It was like that big. No joke. Huge thing, slowly just like sort of flew past in front of the TV screen and went off, and I was just like, what the hell is that? And both me and Perry had the same reaction at the same time. We were like, what the bleep 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 is that? And then both of us thought we saw it go off in a different direction, so we spent a good amount of time looking for that thing. It was huge and it was scary, and it was just but it disappeared. I have no idea where it went, and we couldn't find it in the end. And it was just, I wasn't happy about that. But he hasn't come back. So wherever he's gone, I hope he's gone away and he isn't going to come back anymore. I'm not worried about my yarn, to be honest, because there's only really a couple of breeds of moths that affect yarn and clothing and stuff, and they don't live over here. So I'm not too worried about that. But other than that, the weather has been a little bit crazy this last week. The few days before Perry came back, it was really sort of grey and not grey, sandy. If that makes sense. Everything looked yellow outside. There was a lot of sand in the air. It was very hazy and kind of felt overcast without actually being overcast. It was a very strange thing. But recent, and the weather wasn't too bad. It actually rained at one point last week, a few days ago. But then yesterday was the first day where it's been really hot, as in like really, really hot. I went out at just before 5 in the afternoon to go to the post office and run to the grocery store and get a few things. And the car was registering the temperature as 40 degrees centigrade, and that's 104 Fahrenheit for those of you in the US. So that's the first day where it's been over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, over 40 degrees centigrade this year so far. And that's at 5 p.m. So I can imagine it was a lot hotter during earlier in the day. So it was really warm last night, but it was So yeah, summer's arriving. It's not going to be fun. But also, I know I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that we might be going to Dubai for a weekend. That doesn't seem to be happening anymore because, well, a couple of reasons. One, Perry's quite busy at work and he's quite a few things to do for school and things. But also, I'm probably going to be having somewhat regular trips to Dubai over the next few months. Work has picked up a little bit and there are a few things happening. And I think, I'm not entirely sure when it's going to start, but there are going to be weekly meetings that I have to attend in Dubai. So I'm probably going to have weekly trips to Dubai at some point in the future, sometime soon, I imagine. And I'm hoping they'll give me at least advance enough notice that I can work it out to fit around my schedule a bit better. I am finally working on project bags. I'm not actually doing any sewing. You can see my sewing machine is still up there, but I have been cutting fabrics. I've cut out all the fabrics, all the outer fabrics and all of the lining fabrics. I need to now cut out all the interfacing. And once that is done, I'm going to do them in batches because I have cut out over 200 bags worth of fabric now. I don't know if you can see. If I move here, there's like a big stack of it there. All that stuff. So what I'm probably going to do is once I've cut everything out, then I could do them in batches and do the ironing and then sew the zips and all that, do them in batches and hopefully get some bags out soon. Hopefully by the end of the month. I'm going to take it easy and still not put too much pressure on myself. But yeah, there's that. And I think with that, I am going to call it a day. I will put some footage here at the end of introducing the kitten to our boys. I took a little bit of footage of that last night, so I will stick that in here at the end for you all, for those of you who are interested. And if you're not, then thank you so much for checking me out, and I will see you guys next week. Happy knitting. Bye.